Hello and welcome to the Executive Insights series in association with KPMG. This is a series where we speak to business leaders about their insights into strategies, successes and overcoming challenges. I'm Paddy Farrell and I'm delighted to be joined by Mary Whitelaw, the Chief Sustainability and Corporate Affairs Officer at AIB. AIB has recently won the Business Finance Award in relation to environmental, social and governance for 2022. AIB has put sustainability as a core tenet of its corporate strategy. It's set really ambitious targets in relation to being net zero by 2030 from its own operations, and equally in relation to lending, aiming to have 70% of all new lending by 2030 relating to green or transitional lending. Mary, you're very welcome to our offices here at KPMG and thanks for joining us. Maybe just to get the ball rolling in terms of the award and your success with winning the award at Business and Finance, what do you believe are the core business strategies that have led to this success?
Firstly, just to say it's great to be here in your lovely offices, and we were absolutely delighted to win the Business and Finance ESG Award. Not something that we take for granted, and it was a real privilege to win that award. In relation to our sustainability strategy, look, it's true we have placed sustainability right at the heart of our business strategy, and over the last number of years we've been hopefully making progress on that agenda. We started by setting out a really clear ambition and a number of commitments, and we have sought to ensure that we're putting actions and momentum behind each of those commitments and momentum. We say that we want to build a greener tomorrow by backing those building it today. And look, I suppose in terms of the first of those ambitions, we, as you mentioned, we want 70% of our new lending to be green or transition by 2030. We're currently at about 25%, 25%, so just under a quarter. So making good progress there, but lots done more to do. In terms of our financed emissions, we have an ambition to reach net zero, or a commitment to reach net zero by 2040, with the exception of agriculture, where there's specific considerations. So for that sector, we've set a target of 2050 in line with the government's climate action plan. We recently put in place science-based targets, so we now have a pathway and a plan so that we can measure our progress in relation to those financed emissions, which is really important, making sure that the actions that we take and the outcomes are very measurable. In relation to our own footprint, we've committed to be net zero by 2030, and we're making good progress there. We've successfully made good reductions in our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. One of the more recent steps that we've taken was to put in place a power purchase agreement so that we will take energy from 2 solar farms that are in the process of being constructed in sunny Wexford by NTR. And one of the benefits of that power purchase agreement is that we will be hopefully positioning ourselves well to source 100% of our energy from certified renewable sources by 2030. So another important step. But ultimately, as you can imagine, Paddy is a financial services institution, and importantly as a bank, our lending activities are really important when it comes to the sustainability agenda, and we're really clear on areas where we want to be able to lend more, but also areas where we do not have appetite to lend. And we have an externally published exclusions list, so that we have set out really clearly the activities where we don't want to finance. So for example, we don't finance oil or coal related activities, or natural gas fracking activities, onshore or offshore exploration when it comes to coal or oil. They're all activities where we don't have appetite. Instead, where we would really rather lend and increase our lending is to those large scale renewables infrastructure that support the wider economy in terms of the transition to net zero. So for example, recently we participated in a consortium of banks that provided 500 million euros of funding to the Greenlink interconnector, which runs between Ireland and Wales and is designed to help Ireland to bring more energy from renewable sources onto the national grid. So that's of benefit to the wider economy. We also have a range of green products available for our retail customers, from green mortgages and to green loans designed to make it easier and cheaper for our customers to carry out retrofitting activity or to buy an electric car instead of a petrol or diesel car. So bit by bit we're trying to, across all areas of our business, understand what our customer need and put in place products and services to support those needs. So as I said earlier, some done, but more to do. And if I think about our wider approach across the organisation to this agenda, two areas that have been really important to us and continue to be important are around governance and transparency. So from a governance perspective, back in 2016 we put in place a board subcommittee, which is chaired by Helen O'Moyle, one of our non-executive directors. But also sitting on that committee are a number of the senior executive, including myself, but also importantly our Chief Executive Officer, Colin Hunt. So right from the start, this agenda has received the time, the attention, the support that it needs from those senior stakeholders. And from a governance perspective, that pathway has been clear. So this agenda gets the required, governance, attention and time to help it succeed. From a transparency perspective, we've been publishing a sustainability report since 2016. So there's a lot of disclosures there. And we also include disclosures in our annual financial report. That transparency is really important because as we know, what gets measured gets managed, and by having that bias towards transparency, I guess it keeps the wider organisation sharp, because we know that these are disclosures and metrics that are important to us as a group and important enough for us to share with our wider stakeholders. There are some disclosures and some reporting that's mandatory, and of course we're fully supportive of that. But also from a voluntary perspective, we have made decisions that for example, we were an official supporter of the TCFD framework from back in 2019. In 2021, we adopted the World Economic Forum Stakeholder Capitalism Metrics, which is an expansive list of disclosures designed to create high levels of transparency. So look, that bias is there, and as I've said, I think that's been really important as an enabler on our journey. So I suppose that's just a flavour of it, Paddy.
A lot done, Mary. A lot done by you and your team and AIB. The one bit that resonates with me that you called out there is around governance, and since 2016 having that board governance committee, with responsibility for sustainability, and then equally an equally important executive committee that looks after sustainability. Given the progress that you've made really since 2016, what would you call out to be the proudest moment in terms of the ESG successes that you and your team have had at AIB?
Well, look, I suppose the first thing I'd say is that we live in interesting times, and as we look around at the current global macro environment, we have energy instability, we have high rates of inflation. If we look around globally, there's many regions that are feeling the impact of extreme weather events. And so now more than ever, we strongly believe that it's really important that we keep alive that Paris Agreement target of ensuring temperature rises are limited to 1.5 degree scenario. And there's a lot of distractions. You add COVID into the mix, and there's any number of reasons why this agenda could have faltered or have been blown off track. But what I'm really proud of is that from an AIB perspective, this agenda has continued to be right at the very top of the agenda through all of that, through all of the various, challenges that have emerged in the wider environment. And I think that that's really important when we look at what's happening in the world around us. And look, I suppose within that, like as a bank, we have a natural role to play. Provider in finance is key to that. And our experience in AIB has been that the more green lending we do, the more green capital we can attract. So it becomes quite a virtuous circle. So I suppose this becomes an important element of our commercial agenda. Since over the last 3 years or so, we've issued 3.25 billion in green bonds, and that has allowed us to continue to provide green finance to new projects and more projects. Equally, that has been our experience on the social financing side, where most recently we issued a 750 million social bond, which creates finance available for us for financing new projects with a strong social impact. So I suppose when you look at that virtuous circle and you look at the known demand and requirement for finance that will be necessary to support the transition to a greener economy and a more just and inclusive economy, I think that we've done well to keep it on the agenda, and hopefully that'll continue into the future.
Excellent. And in relation to those organisations, some of whom may be clients of the bank, what advice would you give them in terms of starting out the journey? You've been on your journey since 2016. Yeah. Many are only looking at this and really getting their journey started. What advice would you give to them?
Well, look, one thing I'd say, Paddy, is like it's a broad and deep agenda. So it's very easy to be overwhelmed looking at it or thinking about it and not knowing where to start. And sometimes that the scale of the agenda is off-putting and people lean back. But now more than ever, I think it's really important that we all proactively lean in and take the necessary steps to know and understand the Sustainable Development Goals, which ones are relevant to your organisation, and to work with teams within your own company to know and understand the scale of your ambition, because big or small, all of us can play a role there, and leaning out is not going to help anybody. We all have to lean in, and you might feel initially that there's only small steps that you can take, but small steps are better than no steps. So above all else, just find the role that you can play any role, play as big a role as you can, but make sure you're playing a role. Don't back away from it.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. And given that sustainability, and I know in AIB it's absolutely core to your broader strategy, and that enables that ability to lean in, I guess, for all people in the organisation. If I was to turn to the wider financial services sector, what would you see are the issues facing the financial services sector when it comes to ESG matters?
Great question. And look, I suppose the really obvious one is the need for finance. As a bank, we never forget the core business there. And the IMF have estimated that financing of 20 billion per annum would be required over the next decade, which is a huge number. And now some of that will come from public sources, some of it will come from private sources, and that's an all-encompassing number. So it takes into account a lot of different elements, from reskilling to technologies to innovation to financing of projects. So it's a big number, but there's a huge job at hand there. From an AIB perspective, in 2019, so a couple of years ago now, we put in place a 10 billion. Well, actually, initially it was a 5 billion climate action fund, and actually, as we started to lean into the agenda, we found that we wanted to double that, because we could see greater need and greater opportunity there. So we put in place a 10 billion climate action fund to support our customers in this transition to a low carbon economy. But beyond that, I think that there's lots of ways, and we believe there's lots of ways that we can support our customers, from a readiness perspective to a capacity building perspective, making sure that across the economy the right skills are in place so that we can all adjust to this new normal and adjust to the challenges that lie ahead. An area that's getting a lot of attention at the moment is in the area of disclosures and reporting, maybe because it's coming up to reporting season for many corporates, and also because there's new regulation that's landing. And look, obviously that creates additional work, additional tasks that need to be completed. But one of the big benefits about that new regulation is that it brings a consistency and a comparability, and brings us all into onto the same page, and so that we're speaking the same language. So there's a lot of benefits to that, but it is new, and for many companies, they're going to start grappling with that for the first time. From our side, because we have had voluntary disclosures in place for a while, we're finding the benefit of that now, so that we're not wondering what information is available and where. It's more about where do we have data gaps to close, and what system change is necessary to do that. But I think now more than ever, particularly as mandatory reporting comes down the track, having confidence in that data becomes really important, and being comfortable with its accuracy. And I suppose that's where, I suppose there's a role that will need to be played from an auditing and from an assurance perspective, because ultimately, as we said earlier, what gets measured gets managed, and we want to know and be comfortable that, no different to our financial reporting, that our non-financial reporting comes to the same high standard and with the same controls and assurance and auditing around it as will soon be required under regulation. So look, I suppose there's learnings there for all of us. I suppose we're on the journey there, but in terms of supporting our customers, we want to, I suppose, lean in there and sector by sector share our experience, but also maybe provide some suggestions along the way in terms of what might work at sector level.
Yeah, and given that AIB have been on both sides in terms of being successful with funding, your issuance of green bond as well as your commitment on the lending side of your balance sheet, you're in a prime position to be able to support your customers on that. If I was to turn to Ireland Inc., outside of our narrow focus on financial services for a moment, how do you think Ireland Inc. has performed on the ESG agenda over recent years? Or would you give any advice to policymakers in relation to that?
Oh, look, I can only speak from an AIB perspective, and I suppose the catchphrase, which is probably already overused, is like, a lot done but more to do.
Yeah.
We're under no illusion of the scale of this challenge. But from an Ireland Inc. perspective, like that, the climate action plan is absolutely key, and making sure that we deliver against the climate action plan, but in a way that supports and helps to drive the competitiveness of Ireland for both Indigenous companies and for FDI alike. So I suppose the way in which we go about that is really important.
Well, thanks very much, Mary, for joining us today. I know you're incredibly busy at the moment with reporting season, and congratulations to you, your team, and the broader AIB organisation on your fantastic success at the Business and Finance Awards. And thank you for joining us at the Executive Insight series in association with KPMG.